I've got a question for you. What do the heroes, Batgirl, Superwoman, and Spider-Woman have in common? Sure, they all fight crime in their particular cities, but these heroines were also created to meet the demands of the 20th century women's rights movement. This movement, coupled with the concept of feminism, has been around since the 1800s, some 150 odd years. Now, what we are about to say in no way implies that feminism is not needed, even today, because it is. Instead, we believe feminism, firstly, has two main phases. The first phase focuses on physical equality and transitions to equality in the mental state. Feminism has done quite a lot, notably in the United States and other Western countries, with its advancements through the first phase. But these efforts of gender equality should now be redirected to some of the world's more underprivileged countries that are still stuck at a phase zero, namely those in the Middle East and Africa.
The feminist movement in America is progressing in a strange fashion, and arguments about workplace inequality, intentional male-dominated political systems, and a society based on sexist social norms often arise. Whether these things exist or not, people should remember that many countries have it worse. In the United States, the 19th Amendment in 1920 and the following legislation throughout the 20th century gave women the same amount of rights as men. Some of these rights include suffrage, the right to hold office, the right to work, contraceptive and reproductive rights, mutual divorce laws, equal education, and much more. Since this amendment and the legislation that followed, women have been legally on par with males in a physical sense, that is. So what should the next step be? Aren't women and men equal? Not exactly. We mustn't forget that gender equality is a global goal.
While some Western feminists recognize that legal equality has been achieved, gender feminists still continue to claim that society itself is full of inequalities and needs to be reformed. One of these inequalities is known as the wage gap, the myth that a woman is paid 77 cents for every dollar a man makes. This statistic doesn't acknowledge the fact that it is the average income of all working women compared to the average income of all working men. It doesn't account for variables like the amount of time and experience in the workplace, education, and the amount of men or women working in different occupations that pay lower or higher, such as the amount of women working as a teacher versus the amount of men who are petroleum engineers. It also fails to recognize other variables, including the number of hours worked per week or lifestyle choices and preferences. Recently, many people have become aware of this so-called wage gap, and given the incorrect facts, it seems perfectly reasonable that someone would want to be a feminist. But when you take into account all of the missing variables, it doesn't actually add up. Just consider this. If women are truly paid less than men solely because of their gender, why would an employer hire men at all when a woman could be paid significantly less? Aside from the wage gap, some Western gender feminists claim that women are being oppressed by a patriarchy that imposes sexist societal values on women that prevent them from truly doing what they want. Research begs to differ. In a 1995 Virginia Slims poll, 1 in 6 women and 1 in 5 men disapproved of mothers working while rearing their children. 1 in 3 approved, and the rest said that whatever the mother preferred was fine. Claims that sexist stay-at-home societal values have prohibited women from going and pursuing a career are simply untrue when, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, women make up about 47% of the labor force, and women's participation in the labor force accounted for 57.2% of the working-age women population in 2013 compared to the 69.7% participation rate for men.
It is a fact of society that many women choose different occupations than men do. In 2007 through 2008, 76% of grade school teachers were female. In contrast, only 19% of software developers are women. This gender gap is not due to stereotypes between genders, but rather because of personal preference. We are all so lucky to live in a free world such as this one, where we can choose our occupations and express our opinions as we please. But other people in different countries, not so much.
Myth: gender is a social construct. Fact: a growing body of research in neuroscience, endocrinology, and psychology over the past 40 years suggests there is a biological basis for many gender-based differences, as there are with other animal species. In general, males have better spatial reasoning skills, while females have better verbal skills. Males are greater risk takers, and females are more nurturing. And what do we see when we look at the gender's distribution of the workforce? Many, not all women, wish to pursue careers involving caring for or nurturing others like nursing or psychology, while many, not again all, men pursue careers that involve physically strenuous/dangerous tasks like construction. In no way does this mean that women should be prevented from pursuing their goals in any field they choose, but what it does suggest is that we should not expect an exact 50-50 male-female split in all fields. Males and females are biologically different and therefore have different typical preferences, so why is it concerning that each gender's average earnings are vastly different? For example, teachers and nurses are mostly female, and engineers and mechanics are largely male, so of course there will be big differences in average income.
We should focus more on women all around the world that have not yet had the legal change and reform that the United States of America and West have been fortunate to have. Feminism is greatly needed in countries in Africa and in the Middle East, where the laws actively discriminate against women both physically and mentally. In countries such as Kenya, Liberia, and Rwanda, for instance, women do not have individual property rights and instead are only able to access or utilize property if it's already owned by their husband or male family member. Another example of the lack of female authority comes from Michelle Fram Cohen's The Condition of Women in Developing and Developed Countries, in which formal civil law sometimes joins the customary law in fostering the subjugation of women. To elaborate, the socialist regimen in Ethiopia enshrines customary law by appointing only men to be guardians of the state-owned means of production, especially land. In Somalia and Sudan, customary laws have been reinforced by formal law founded on Islam, which disallows any ownership of land or property by women.
But the systematic oppression of women doesn't stop there. Islamic law stimulates honor killings in Muslim countries and occasionally among Muslim immigrants in Western countries. Women who dishonor the family include rape victims, women suspected of engaging in premarital sex, and women accused of adultery. In fact, according to the UNIFEM report, Violence Against Women, Facts and Figures, more than 1,000 women are killed in Pakistan every year for dishonoring their families. These atrocious sexist crimes against humanity almost never gain the much-needed attention in the West. Instead, modern Western feminists drone on and on about generalizations about how women are oppressed by the expectations and sexual objectifications of the patriarchy, which is nothing more than a conspiracy in the West in contrast to actual institutionalized patriarchies in other parts of the world. We are not saying that these women shouldn't be able to speak freely about what they believe, but we believe that instead Western feminism should cease to exist in its current form and direct attention and efforts to the less fortunate societies to fight for equality between males and females. Here in the U.S., feminists are able to speak freely about the things they wish to change in society. This alone speaks volumes about the contrast between the rights of Western and Middle Eastern or African women. By this point, there are a few questions that we need to answer. Are women in developing countries living under an institutionalized patriarchy? Yes. Do most of them have the ability to vote? No. Can they hold office? No. What about pay? Is that equal in developing countries? Of course not. Can they even own property? In most cases, no. Because of this, most women face systematic oppression which forces them to stay at home, raise children, and do whatever their male family members demand. Females are not even considered equally as human as males in many parts of Africa or the Middle East, or even other parts of the world. Using the Neolithic era as a basis for comparison, in the 19th and 20th centuries, women have achieved significant progress in economically progressive areas dominated by Western culture, including North America, Europe, and Australia. In developing areas where there is an absence of Western culture, however, women remain more or less subjugated, and in some countries they are stripped of any human rights. If there is anything to take from all this, it is that Western feminism has run its course. Western women share all of the same legal rights and economic and social freedom and opportunity as men. Is our culture or society perfect? No, but the struggles that women face nowadays are no longer institutionalized, and not every issue involving women is a women's right issue because these women do have equal rights. As for feminism in developing nations, it is greatly needed in areas such as the Middle East and Africa. Women have virtually no rights in these areas of the world. The fight for equality should never stop, but it instead needs to be redirected to the places of the world where it is truly needed.